Aaliyah had always been a careful and observant person. She liked noticing small things that most people ignored. Today, she was working late in the office, the only sound around her being the faint hum of computers and the occasional clatter of papers. The office tower was almost empty, most employees had left hours ago, and even the cleaning staff had finished for the night. Aaliyah liked these quiet hours. They gave her space to think, organize, and sometimes just observe the people around her, even if they weren't there. She walked slowly between the rows of desks, her heels making soft taps on the polished floor. The office was sleek, modern, and expensive-looking. Glass walls reflected the soft light from the ceiling, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning products. Even though she had been working in the building for almost a year, Aaliyah never got used to the feeling of being surrounded by so much wealth. The office belonged to Ethan Harper, a billionaire CEO, and it was famous for being luxurious but also secretive. Ethan had a reputation for being very private, even mysterious. People said he trusted very few, and his fiancée, a woman named Victoria, was always seen as perfect, elegant, and poised. Aaliyah reached Ethan's office door. It was made of heavy glass, frosted to prevent outsiders from seeing inside, but she could tell the office was empty. The door had a keypad, and she was lucky enough to have the access code. She stepped in quietly. Her job as an assistant often required her to organize files, make sure documents were in order, and sometimes tidy up spaces that others overlooked. Tonight, she was simply checking that everything was neat. She walked past Ethan's massive desk, running her fingers lightly over the polished surface. Everything was in its place, papers stacked neatly, pens lined up in holders, and a single photograph of Ethan and Victoria smiling at some gala event. Aaliyah smiled faintly at the picture. She had seen it many times before, but tonight it felt different. She felt a small twinge of unease she could not explain. Her eyes wandered around the room. She checked the corners, as she often did, just out of habit. That's when she noticed it, a small, almost invisible object tucked near a ceiling corner. It was black and shiny, and its lens reflected the light from the office lamps. Aaliyah froze for a moment, her heart beating faster. It was a camera. The next morning, Aaliyah arrived at the office feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. She knew the events of the previous day had changed everything. The camera in Ethan's office was no longer just a small, hidden device, it had become a symbol of the unseen dangers lurking around them. Every step she took felt more careful, more deliberate. Every glance she gave around the office was sharper, more observant. She could not allow herself to be careless not now. The following morning, Aaliyah arrived at the office with a renewed sense of focus. She knew that the week ahead could be crucial in uncovering the truth behind the unusual activities she had been documenting. Each observation, each note, and each subtle detail she had recorded could lead them to a resolution. She felt a mixture of anticipation and responsibility, understanding that she could not afford to let even small distractions affect her focus. Ethan was already in his office, reviewing files and security footage from the previous week. His calm and steady presence was reassuring, but Aaliyah could see the seriousness in his eyes. He gestured for her to come in, and she moved quietly to his desk. "Good morning, Aaliyah," Ethan said. "We have enough observations now to take the next step. We have patterns and evidence that point to specific individuals and activities. But we must proceed carefully. We will need to confirm everything before any action is taken." Aaliyah nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. The investigation had required patience, careful observation, and disciplined documentation. She had spent days watching, noting, and analyzing behaviors, and now all that effort could finally lead to a breakthrough. "Sir," she said, "I have noticed that some employees have been unusually secretive, and some deliveries occur outside regular schedules. I documented every instance, including times and locations. I believe this information can help identify the source of the problem." Ethan took the notebook and scanned it carefully, his eyes narrowing as he noted the details. Excellent work. This is thorough and precise. Your attention to small details has made a huge difference. These notes will allow us to confront the issue with evidence, not assumptions. Aaliyah felt a small sense of pride but also a lingering tension. She knew that confronting anyone involved could change the office dynamic, and she was aware of the responsibility she carried. But she also understood that patience and careful planning would ensure a proper resolution. By mid-morning, Ethan and Aaliyah began coordinating a controlled approach to address the situation. They reviewed each observation, noting the most significant irregularities and identifying patterns in behavior. Certain delivery personnel and employees were consistently involved in suspicious activity, and the evidence suggested intentionality rather than coincidence. Ethan explained, "We will begin by verifying each observation with clear evidence. We need to ensure there is no misunderstanding or misinterpretation. Once we have confirmation, we can address the individuals involved in a professional and controlled manner." Aaliyah agreed, appreciating the methodical approach. She had learned that rushing or assuming could lead to mistakes, and she trusted Ethan's guidance. She returned to her observation duties, carefully documenting behaviors, interactions, and any deviations from normal routines. Every step she took was deliberate, and every note was precise. Later in the day, she noticed a delivery worker attempting to access a restricted area without authorization. The worker appeared nervous and glanced around frequently. Aaliyah discreetly recorded the time, location, and behavior, making sure not to be seen. She realized that these repeated actions were no longer small irregularities, they indicated deliberate attempts to bypass rules. When she shared this with Ethan, he nodded gravely. "This confirms our suspicions. Patterns like this cannot be ignored. Your observation skills have helped us identify not just the actions but the intent behind them. Well done." Encouraged by his words, Aaliyah continued her careful monitoring. She observed two employees engaging in whispered conversations near sensitive areas, both frequently checking to see if anyone was watching. Their cautious behavior, combined with previous irregularities, suggested they were aware of their actions being monitored and were attempting to conceal something significant. Ethan reviewed her notes and the security footage together. "We have enough information to proceed," he said finally. "We will address the matter professionally, ensuring that we maintain order and clarity. Confrontation without evidence is not productive, but with this documentation, we can resolve the issue efficiently." Aaliyah felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. After days of careful observation, the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. She understood that the resolution would require tact and professionalism, and she trusted Ethan to handle it with care. In the afternoon, Ethan called a private meeting with the individuals involved. Aaliyah observed from a discreet distance, ensuring that everything proceeded smoothly. The individuals were presented with clear evidence of their actions, along with explanations of why those actions were inappropriate and potentially harmful. The response was a mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and acknowledgement of the mistake. There were no angry confrontations or dramatic outbursts. Instead, the meeting was conducted calmly, with a focus on understanding and correction. Ethan emphasized the importance of honesty, integrity, and adherence to office protocols, making it clear that the actions observed were not acceptable. Aaliyah watched quietly, feeling a sense of satisfaction. The resolution had been handled professionally, and the individuals involved had an opportunity to learn from their mistakes. She understood that accountability was essential, and this approach ensured that the office environment would remain safe, fair, and productive. After the meeting, Ethan spoke to Aaliyah privately. "You have done exceptional work. Your observations, notes, and careful analysis allowed us to resolve this situation effectively. Patience, attention to detail, and professionalism made all the difference." Aaliyah smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced a challenging situation, required careful judgment and discretion, and contributed meaningfully to a resolution. Her efforts had been recognized, and she had learned valuable lessons about observation, patience, and responsibility. The next few days in the office were noticeably calmer. The unusual behaviors had ceased, and there was a renewed sense of focus and professionalism among all employees. Aaliyah continued her work, but now with a sense of confidence and reassurance. She knew that vigilance was always important, but the immediate threat had been addressed, and the office environment was safer as a result. Ethan also took steps to improve security measures and protocols, ensuring that similar incidents could be prevented in the future. Aaliyah assisted in documenting these procedures and monitoring their implementation, contributing to a long-term solution that strengthened the organization's integrity. Throughout the process, Aaliyah reflected on the lessons she had learned. She realized that courage and effectiveness did not always require confrontation or dramatic action. Sometimes, success came from careful observation, quiet diligence, and disciplined attention to detail. By staying focused, patient, and professional, she had played a key role in resolving a complex and sensitive issue. By the end of the week, Aaliyah felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The office was stable, the irregular activities had been addressed, and the environment was once again professional and orderly. She had proven to herself that careful observation, patience, and professionalism could make a real difference. Ethan acknowledged her efforts publicly in a team meeting, praising her dedication, attention to detail, and effective documentation. Her colleagues listened with respect, recognizing the importance of her contributions. Aaliyah felt proud, not from personal recognition, but from knowing that her careful work had helped protect the office environment and maintain integrity. As she left the office that Friday evening, she reflected on the past few weeks. The challenges she had faced, the careful observations she had made, and the disciplined actions she had taken had all contributed to a successful resolution. She understood that challenges were a part of any workplace, but with focus, patience, and professionalism, even difficult situations could be resolved effectively. Walking out of the building, Aaliyah felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced uncertainty, observed carefully, documented diligently, and contributed to a resolution that ensured fairness and safety for everyone. Her experiences had strengthened her skills, increased her confidence, and deepened her understanding of responsibility and accountability. She knew that future challenges might arise, but she also knew that she was capable of handling them with the same diligence, patience, and careful observation that had guided her through this situation. With a sense of calm and confidence, she stepped into the evening, ready for whatever lay ahead, knowing that she had made a meaningful difference and that her efforts had mattered in ways that would continue to benefit the office and everyone in it. The following week, Aaliyah arrived at the office with a sense of quiet determination. She had spent the weekend reviewing her notes and thinking about everything she had observed so far. The situation with the hidden camera and the unusual activities in the office was far from resolved, and she knew she had to remain focused, patient, and alert. Every detail she had recorded mattered, and she could not let fatigue or distraction compromise her efforts. Ethan was already at his desk when she arrived, reviewing reports and security footage. His calm, focused demeanor reassured her, but she could also sense the seriousness of the situation. There was no room for error. She greeted him quietly, and he nodded in acknowledgement, his sharp eyes briefly meeting hers before returning to the documents in front of him. "Good morning, Aaliyah," Ethan said after a moment. "I've reviewed the security footage from last week, and I noticed some irregularities you documented. Your observations are proving to be very useful." Aaliyah felt a small sense of pride. She had been working quietly, carefully, and now her attention to detail was making a real difference. "Thank you, sir," she replied softly. "I just want to make sure everything is done carefully. I know how important this is." Ethan nodded. "Good. We will continue systematically. We are close to identifying the source of these irregularities, but we must remain patient. Sometimes people make mistakes when they think no one is watching. That's when the truth comes out." Aaliyah spent the morning carefully observing the office environment. She noticed small behaviors that had gone unnoticed before, a colleague nervously adjusting their glasses whenever certain documents were mentioned, another glancing repeatedly at a phone before leaving the room, and a delivery worker lingering near areas they had no reason to access. She documented everything in her notebook, making sure to include times, dates, and descriptions of behavior. By late morning, Ethan called her into his office. "I've cross-referenced your observations with our records," he said. "There are patterns emerging. Certain employees and delivery personnel are consistently present during unusual times, and some of their movements do not align with their official responsibilities." Aaliyah listened carefully. She could feel the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together, but she also knew there were still many unknowns. "Sir, should I confront anyone?" she asked cautiously. Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. Confrontation can create panic and cause people to cover their tracks. We need to gather more evidence quietly. Patience is key." He paused, looking thoughtful. "We will set up a controlled observation today. I want you to watch specific areas and report any unusual activity without drawing attention to yourself. Are you ready for that?" Aaliyah nodded. She knew this would require careful planning and focus, but she felt ready. She had been preparing for this moment all week, and she understood the importance of being discreet and accurate. Throughout the afternoon, she moved quietly through the office, her notebook in hand. She observed the behaviors of the employees and delivery personnel, noting every small detail, the way they moved, who they interacted with, and any unusual timing. Her focus was sharp, and she did not let distractions interfere with her observations. During one period of observation, she noticed a delivery worker lingering near the storage area longer than necessary. The worker seemed anxious, frequently checking over their shoulder as if expecting someone to be watching. Aaliyah documented every movement carefully, noting the exact times and behaviors. Later, she observed two colleagues entering a restricted area together, whispering as they went. They glanced around frequently, clearly aware that they were doing something they shouldn't. Aaliyah's notebook filled quickly with detailed observations. She made sure to remain calm and quiet, understanding that any sudden movements or questions could alert them to her presence. After documenting these incidents, she returned to Ethan's office. He reviewed her notes with careful attention, occasionally asking questions about minor details. "Excellent work," he said finally. "These observations are exactly what we need. They show intent and pattern, not just isolated incidents. Keep watching and documenting, and we will soon have a clear picture." Aaliyah felt a mixture of relief and tension. She was proud of her careful work, but she also understood that the situation was becoming more serious. The individuals involved were deliberate and cautious, and any mistake could compromise the entire investigation. As the day progressed, she continued her observations, noticing subtle changes in behavior. Certain employees appeared more cautious, their movements more deliberate, and their conversations quieter. Some seemed anxious, avoiding eye contact, or when she reached Ethan's office, she found him already seated behind his desk, reviewing reports. His calm presence was reassuring, but Aaliyah could sense the tension in the air. He had not yet shared his findings with her, and she understood why. Some things were better handled privately until a clear plan was formed. She greeted him politely, and he nodded in acknowledgement, his focus remaining on the papers in front of him. "I've gone over the visitor logs and security footage from the past month," Ethan began after a moment, finally looking up at her. His tone was steady, measured, but there was a sharp edge of concern in his eyes. "There are some irregularities. Certain deliveries were logged as routine, but the timing and personnel involved don't match standard procedures. Someone has been taking advantage of that. We don't yet know who, but the camera in my office is likely connected." Aaliyah listened intently, her mind processing every detail. "Sir, do you think it could be someone from our own team?" she asked carefully. She had been considering this possibility herself. Internal betrayal was always more dangerous than external threats because it was harder to detect and often unexpected. Ethan nodded slowly. It's possible. That's why we need to be extra cautious. Trust is a tool, but it can also be a weapon when misplaced. He leaned back, thinking carefully. We will need to approach this systematically. No rash decisions, no hasty confrontations. Whoever is behind this will make mistakes if we stay calm and observant. Aaliyah admired his patience and clear-headedness. She knew from experience that panic often led to mistakes, and mistakes could be costly. What should I do, sir? She asked. You continue your regular work, but stay alert. Observe anyone who seems out of place, any unusual behavior, and report it directly to me. Do not discuss this with anyone else, he instructed. And if you notice anything related to deliveries, visitors, or unusual access to sensitive areas, document it carefully. Every detail matters. She nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had always been meticulous in her work, but now the stakes were higher. She could no longer focus solely on routine tasks, she had to observe, analyze, and report. Every action she took could have consequences. As the day progressed, Aaliyah moved quietly through the office, her senses heightened. She noticed small details she had overlooked before: a delivery person lingering longer than necessary, a colleague entering areas they did not usually access, even subtle changes in behavior among her co-workers. She took notes discreetly in her small notebook, careful to avoid drawing attention. During lunch, she met Ethan in the cafeteria, which was relatively empty at that hour. He was reviewing another set of documents, his expression thoughtful. Aaliyah sat across from him, her own notes in hand. I've noticed something unusual, she began cautiously. Some employees have been accessing the storage areas more frequently, especially after regular hours. It might be routine, but the timing seems off. I made a note of the dates and times. Ethan took the notebook, scanning her observations carefully. Good work, Aaliyah. These are exactly the details we need. Patterns emerge when we have accurate records. Keep observing and documenting, but remember, stay discreet. If anyone realizes we are investigating, they may cover their tracks. Aaliyah nodded, appreciating his guidance. She realized that this investigation required patience, discipline, and careful judgment. It was not just about noticing what was happening but understanding why it was happening and what it meant. After lunch, they returned to their offices, but the tension remained. Aaliyah continued her work, but every movement, every interaction, was filtered through a lens of observation. She began noticing subtle signs that she had ignored before: a colleague avoiding eye contact when certain topics were mentioned, a cleaning staff member lingering near sensitive areas longer than necessary, even minor inconsistencies in the way information was recorded. Ethan, meanwhile, was working quietly to cross-reference the data she was collecting with security footage and delivery logs. He identified a few key irregularities and instructed Aaliyah to keep an eye on specific individuals. The two of them were forming a silent partnership, a combination of observation, analysis, and careful planning. By late afternoon, Aaliyah noticed something that immediately caught her attention. A new delivery had arrived earlier than usual, and the person handling it seemed nervous, constantly glancing around as if expecting someone to watch. Aaliyah made a mental note and discreetly followed the delivery person's actions, keeping her distance. She observed as they moved through the office, placing the package in a storage area that was supposed to be off-limits without authorization. She returned to her desk and documented every detail in her notebook. When Ethan reviewed her notes, he looked up with a sharp expression. "This is exactly what we were looking for," he said quietly. "Someone is trying to access areas without proper authorization, and their behavior shows they are aware of doing something wrong." Good observation. Aaliyah felt a small surge of pride. She was actively contributing to uncovering the truth, and her careful attention to detail was paying off. At the same time, she felt the weight of the situation pressing on her. The person behind these actions was deliberate, cautious, and potentially dangerous. She could not afford to make a mistake. The following days were filled with careful observation, documentation, and quiet analysis. Aaliyah noticed patterns emerging from the data she collected. Certain deliveries always occurred at specific times, some employees were present more often than necessary, and small discrepancies in records became more apparent. Ethan used these insights to narrow down potential suspects and identify areas where security could be strengthened. One evening, as the office began to empty and the sun cast long shadows across the floor, Aaliyah and Ethan had a brief conversation. "You've been doing excellent work," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "Your attention to detail and patience have helped us uncover patterns that we might have missed otherwise. Keep this up, and we will get to the bottom of this." Aaliyah felt a quiet satisfaction. She had always been diligent, but this recognition from Ethan meant more than words could express. It was proof that her efforts mattered, that she was making a difference in a serious situation. However, with each passing day, the tension grew. Aaliyah began to notice subtle signs of unease among certain colleagues. Some seemed more cautious than usual, others whispered in corners, and a few avoided her gaze entirely. She documented these observations carefully, knowing that even small details could be significant. One afternoon, she observed a conversation between two colleagues near the storage area. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. Aaliyah could not hear everything, but she noted their body language, the way they moved, and the timing of their interaction. She recorded everything meticulously in her notebook. When she shared her notes with Ethan, he analyzed the information carefully. "This is useful," he said. "Even if we don't know the exact content of their conversation, the context and behavior tell us something. Patterns of secrecy and avoidance often indicate hidden intentions." Aaliyah felt the importance of every observation settle deeper into her mind. This was not just a routine investigation, it was a delicate puzzle that required patience, accuracy, and careful judgment. Each piece of information mattered, and a single mistake could compromise the entire effort. By the end of the week, the evidence had begun to form a clearer picture. Ethan identified a few key individuals who required further monitoring, and Aaliyah continued her discreet observations. Together, they were piecing together the situation, slowly uncovering the layers of secrecy and caution that had been hidden beneath routine office life. As she left the office on Friday evening, Aaliyah reflected on the week's events. She felt a mixture of fatigue and determination. The investigation was far from over, but progress had been made. She had learned the value of patience, observation, and careful judgment. She had realized that courage was not always about confrontation. She crouched slightly and looked closer. The device was hidden in a way that made next morning, Aaliyah arrived at the office earlier than usual. The city streets were busy, cars honking softly, people rushing to their destinations, but she moved calmly, her mind focused entirely on the task ahead. She carried her bag and her small notebook carefully. Every step she took felt heavier than usual because she knew what she held in her hands, the secret she had discovered last night. The camera in Ethan's office was more than just a piece of equipment. It was proof that someone was watching, listening, and possibly planning something. Aaliyah entered the building quietly, nodding to the security guard who barely noticed her presence. The lobby was bright and polished, reflecting the morning sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. Most employees were arriving at their desks, greeting colleagues, and starting their day with coffee and chatter. Aaliyah, however, moved past all of it. Her mind was focused on Ethan and the conversation she needed to have. She reached the elevator and pressed the button for his floor. The small ride up felt long, each floor's ding echoing like a drum in her head. When the elevator doors opened, she walked straight to Ethan's office, her heart beating faster with each step. She had thought carefully about what she would say. She would not panic, not accuse anyone, and not jump to conclusions. She would speak calmly, clearly, and honestly. That was the only way to get him to listen and understand the seriousness of the situation. Ethan was already in his office when she arrived, sitting behind his massive desk, reviewing documents with his usual calm focus. He looked up as she entered, his sharp eyes meeting hers. "Good morning, Aaliyah." "You're early," he said, his voice polite but curious. "Good morning, sir," Aaliyah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I found something yesterday that I think you should know about." She paused for a moment, gathering courage. "It's about your office, and it might be important." Ethan leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow. "Go on." His tone was calm but firm, the kind of tone that demanded attention without raising alarm. Aaliyah felt a small surge of confidence. She had prepared for this moment carefully, and she knew she had to explain everything clearly. She took a deep breath and explained what she had seen. "Last night, while I was organizing the office, I noticed a small camera in the corner, near the ceiling. It was hidden, but I could see it clearly. I took a photo of it with my phone so we could have proof. I didn't touch it, and I didn't tell anyone else, because I wasn't sure what it was for or who put it there." Ethan's expression remained calm, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he listened. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, and looked at her phone as she showed the photo. The camera was visible, small and black, almost blending into the corner. Ethan studied it silently for a moment, then looked back at her. "You noticed this by yourself?" he asked, his voice measured. "Yes, sir," Aaliyah replied. "I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I thought it would be better to gather information first and then tell you." Ethan nodded slowly. "Good thinking. You did the right thing by not touching it and not alarming anyone else. This could be serious." He paused, considering his next words. "Do you have any idea who might have installed it?" Aaliyah shook her head. "No, sir. I don't know. I haven't seen anyone suspicious, and nothing in the office seemed out of place except the camera itself. But I thought it was important to tell you as soon as possible." Ethan leaned back in his chair again, deep in thought. He had always trusted his instincts, and right now, his instincts told him that this was not a simple mistake or prank. Someone had gone through the trouble to install a camera in his private office. Someone had been watching. And if they were smart, they had done it without leaving any trace. He looked at Aaliyah and spoke quietly, almost as if thinking aloud. "This could be personal, or it could be corporate. Either way, it's dangerous. And I don't want anyone else to know until we understand the situation completely." Aaliyah nodded. "I understand, sir. I wanted to make sure you knew before anyone else found out or did something wrong." Ethan studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You have a sharp mind, Aaliyah. I appreciate your careful thinking. You handled this very well. Most people would have panicked or touched something and left evidence. You didn't. That matters." Aaliyah felt a small blush rise to her cheeks. She had not expected praise from Ethan, especially in such a tense situation. But his words made her feel seen, respected, and even a little proud of her own courage. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. I just want to help." Ethan nodded, then stood up. He walked over to the corner of his office where the camera had been hidden. "I want to see this in person," he said, pointing to the corner. Aaliyah led him carefully, making sure not to disturb anything. The camera was small but noticeable now in the light of day. Ethan examined it, noting its angle, placement, and the fact that it had a small lens aimed directly at his desk. He nodded thoughtfully. This was done carefully. Whoever did this knew exactly what they wanted to see. And they knew how to hide it. Aaliyah watched quietly, impressed by his calm and analytical approach. She could see why he was successful. He never rushed to conclusions, he observed, and he thought strategically. Ethan turned back to her. We need to handle this carefully. I don't want anyone panicking or making mistakes. We'll start by gathering information quietly. I also need to review recent visitors, security footage, and anyone who might have access to this floor. Yes, sir, Aaliyah replied. She felt a mixture of relief and tension. Relief that Ethan was taking the situation seriously, and tension because she realized how complicated this could become. For the next few hours, Aaliyah and Ethan worked together carefully. She provided her observations, when she had discovered the camera, how she had noticed it, and even small details about the office layout that could help Ethan understand how someone could have installed it. Ethan listened intently, asking questions and taking notes. As they worked, Aaliyah noticed subtle changes in Ethan's expression when she mentioned certain things about his fiancée, Victoria. He did not react immediately, but there was a flicker of concern, a hint of curiosity. Aaliyah did not mention her suspicions about Victoria yet, but she kept her thoughts organized carefully in her mind. By mid-morning, Ethan had made a plan. He would keep the information private for now, but he would start investigating quietly. Security would review the cameras on the floors below and above, checking for anyone who had suspicious movements. He would also review visitor logs, delivery records, and anyone who had recently accessed his office. Aaliyah felt a sense of relief mixed with apprehension. She had played a small but important role in uncovering something that could be dangerous. She knew the next steps would be critical. One wrong move, one accidental revelation, and the situation could become messy. Ethan looked at her once more and said quietly, "Aaliyah, you did well. But be careful. Whoever installed that camera may not have expected anyone to notice. And they may try to cover their tracks." "I understand, sir," she replied. She felt a shiver, realizing just how serious the situation was. But she also felt determined. She would continue to help, observe, and stay careful. She could not let fear control her, not now. The rest of the morning passed in a tense but focused atmosphere. Aaliyah continued her regular duties, but she remained alert, her eyes scanning the office, her ears listening for anything unusual. Ethan moved with purpose, reviewing information and making calls quietly, his calm demeanor masking the tension of knowing someone had invaded his private space. As lunch approached, Aaliyah felt a small sense of accomplishment. She had taken the first step in uncovering a potential threat, and she had done so without panic, without mistakes. She also felt a growing respect for Ethan. He was not only powerful but also careful, observant, and thoughtful. Someone she could trust in moments of uncertainty. By the end of the day, Ethan had set the plan in motion. Security teams were reviewing footage, visitor logs were being checked, and Aaliyah had been instructed to continue observing without drawing attention to herself. She knew the next days would be critical, but she also knew that she was part of something important. As she packed her things to leave the office, Aaliyah glanced at the photograph of Ethan and Victoria on his desk. She still could not shake a small feeling of unease, but she kept her thoughts organized and professional. She had done what she could for now, and she trusted Ethan to take the next steps. Walking to the elevator, she felt a mix of exhaustion and determination. She had faced a serious situation with courage and intelligence, and she was ready for whatever would come next. The camera in the office had revealed more than just a device, it had revealed the importance of observation, it almost unnoticeable, but she had an eye for details. Someone had gone through the trouble to install it in Ethan's office, but why? Aaliyah's mind raced. Was it corporate espionage? Was someone trying to spy on Ethan personally? She felt a chill run down her spine. Aaliyah knew she had to be careful. She could not confront anyone yet. She needed more information. She pulled out her phone and snapped a quick, discreet photo of the camera, then sent it to herself with the time and location noted. She sat down on the edge of Ethan's leather chair, her mind spinning. Questions filled her thoughts. Who could have done this? Was it dangerous for Ethan? And most importantly, Should she tell him now or wait? Her mind drifted briefly to Ethan. She had met him a few times during meetings, and every time he had impressed her. He was smart, calm, and observant. But he also seemed to trust very few people. Could he handle knowing there was a camera in his private office? And what about Victoria, his fiancée? She had always seemed elegant and perfect, but people like that sometimes had secrets of their own. Aaliyah's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside. Her heart jumped. Someone was coming. She quickly straightened up and pretended to be checking the desk drawers. The footsteps stopped near the office door, and for a moment, she held her breath. Then she heard a soft knock. "Aaliyah? You still here?" It was the voice of Mark, a colleague from another department. He was tall and friendly, always polite, and had no idea about the camera. "Yes, Mark," Aaliyah replied calmly, masking her nervousness. "Just finishing up some files. You can go ahead if you need the office." Mark nodded, smiling, and walked away. Aaliyah let out a slow breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She returned her gaze to the small camera. She knew she could not remove it herself. She needed Ethan to know, but she had to do it carefully. If this was personal, a wrong move could make the situation worse. Aaliyah decided to gather evidence. She started looking around the office for any signs that someone had been sneaking in or tampering with things. Papers were untouched, drawers locked, and computers shut down. Whoever installed the camera had been careful. This was not a casual setup. Someone wanted to watch Ethan closely. She moved toward the camera again, noting its placement. It could easily record anyone who sat at the desk or used the computer. Whoever was watching would have a complete view of Ethan's office. Aaliyah felt a mix of fear and determination. She was scared, but she also knew she had to act wisely. This was not just a prank or a small mistake. This was serious. Aaliyah pulled out a small notebook she kept for observations and wrote down everything she noticed, the camera's position, the angle, and the possible purpose. She noted the time she found it and how she discovered it. Then she paused. Should she tell anyone tonight, or wait until Ethan was free? She decided to wait until the next morning. Tonight, she would watch, plan, and stay alert. As she was about to leave the office, she glanced at the photograph of Ethan and Victoria again. Something about it felt off now. Victoria's smile was perfect, but Aaliyah's mind replayed small details she had seen over the past months, subtle hints in Victoria's behavior, moments of distraction, small lies that didn't fit the image of the perfect fiancé. Could there be a connection between Victoria and the camera? Aaliyah did not want to assume anything, but the thought lingered. She left the office quietly, locking the door behind her. The corridor was empty, and the soft glow of the overhead lights guided her steps. She kept her phone close, checking the photos she had sent herself. The camera was clear in the image, and Aaliyah felt a small sense of reassurance. She had proof. That was the first step. Back at her desk in the main office area, she sat down and tried to calm her thoughts. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear alone, but from the weight of responsibility. She had discovered something important, something that could affect Ethan personally and professionally. She knew she had to be smart, careful, and patient. For the rest of the night, she worked quietly, finishing minor tasks and organizing files, but her mind kept returning to the camera. Who was behind it? Why was Ethan being watched? And most importantly, what would happen when he found out? She could not sleep yet, she needed to think, plan, and prepare. As the hours passed, the office grew even quieter. The city lights outside the tall windows flickered softly, casting long shadows across the floor. Aaliyah looked out at the skyline, feeling a mix of anxiety and resolve. She was just one person, but she had discovered something that could change everything. And she knew she could not ignore it. Finally, after a long and careful night, Aaliyah packed her bag and left the office. She walked to the elevator, her mind still racing with questions and possibilities. She knew tomorrow would be different. She would have to approach Ethan, but she had to be precise, careful, and respectful. Her discovery could save him from danger, but it could also put her in an uncomfortable position if handled incorrectly. As she stepped out into the cool night air, she took a deep breath. The city was alive with lights, sounds, and movement, but she felt alone with her thoughts. The camera in Ethan's office was not just a piece of technology, it was a secret, a hidden threat, and a mystery waiting to be solved. And Aaliyah was now at the center of it. She walked home slowly, thinking about the plan she would need for the morning. She would gather her notes, organize her thoughts, and decide the safest and most effective way to tell Ethan. She knew he would appreciate her intelligence and careful approach, but she also knew she had to be cautious. One wrong word, one wrong step, and the situation could spiral out of control. By the time Aaliyah reached her apartment, the first hints of dawn were appearing in the sky. She felt exhausted but determined. She had discovered something important, and she was ready to take the next step, even though she didn't yet know what that step would fully involve. She placed her phone on the nightstand, reviewing the photo one last time, and finally allowed herself to rest, knowing tomorrow would bring answers, challenges, and maybe even unexpected revelations.